broadcasting at 2 p.m. from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing weeknights at 8 p.m. on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome to the Gailey Show. It is Entertainment Fridays. What that means is that today, on the second half of the show, we have Mae West and the Trial of Sex, produced by Walking Shadow Theater Company, opens at the Crane Theater in the Twin Cities on May 31st. Playwright John Heimbuch and director Allison Vincent will join us to talk about Mae West's legal battle over censorship to show how queer representation became criminalized on stage and screen, cutting LGBTQIA+ people off from their past. But up first, author Christopher Tradowsky's debut novel, Midnight at the Cinema Palace, comes out on June 10th. For folks on YouTube, you can see me holding it up here. Gorgeous cover. Christopher is a writer, artist, and art historian. He was awarded the J. Michael Samuel Prize from the Lambda Literary Foundation in 2023. He also earned the Bloom Literary Journal Prize for fiction, rather. At Augsburg University, he teaches art history and mentors writers in the Creative Writing MFA program. In its review of Midnight at the Cinema Palace, Publishers Weekly writes, Tradowsky's film references are as finely tuned as his observations about relationships. Queer cinephiles will be especially enthralled. He joins us now. Hello, Christopher. Welcome to The Gailey Show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, John, and I'm delighted to be here.
I have to say, so I used to work at St. Paul College and Normandale Community College, and I just always love talking to folks from Augsburg. You guys are the coolest. So I'm also on that level happy to be speaking with you today. And congratulations on this debut novel. That's got to be very exciting. I actually want to start with the note to the reader. I thought that was a really nice touch and really sets a lovely tone before we get into the novel. So could we start there and tell us a little bit about that note to the reader?
Sure. I'm almost a little sorry that the note to the reader isn't included in the book itself.
Okay, we'll tell people about the note to the reader. I have an advanced reading copy. Don't be jealous, listeners.
Go ahead and be jealous. No, the advanced reader copies, they ask me to write a note to the reader, and sometimes it's for publicity purposes to introduce the book and the author, and then sometimes the editor will provide that note, but they asked me to do it, and I think it was because the book is so personal to me. Yeah, I had fun writing that, and I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but I did talk about, basically, in writing this book, I wanted to write the queerest book I possibly could. It was kind of a bad time in my life when I started writing it, in the sense that's like, my job was really precarious, and it was the first Trump administration, and it was also COVID, the beginning of COVID, and it was just a really difficult time. And I had started writing this book already before the COVID lockdown. But when it happened, I really needed something to lift myself up. And so I decided to dedicate myself to writing this book about joy, basically, and specifically queer joy, and a book that would be a comfort to queer people in really difficult times.
Well, I think you definitely accomplished that. So when we turn to page 1, what can we expect?
There's a short preamble that basically sets the mood of the book. It's 2 pages long. It doesn't tell you that much about what's going to happen, except for that it introduces the main character, whose name is Walter, and then it introduces the setting and the mood. So the first 2 pages is a dream or a set of dreams that Walter's having about snow falling on San Francisco. And it sets a really dreamy mood for the novel. And it also indicates the kind of reading experience you're going to have. It's very much a literary novel. So there's a lot of concentration on the language. It's kind of poetic language. And so it just basically sets the mood and the setting and introduces Walter.
I have to admit, this is kind of weird about myself. I've never actually been to San Francisco, which is where the novel takes place. But if you asked me if I could travel back in time to any place in the world, I would actually pick arriving in San Francisco in 61, like as an 18-year-old, so really fresh at the start of the decade. But this novel is set in the early 90s. And talk to me about San Francisco.
Oh, well, I did live there in the early 90s. It's definitely a novel. It's based on my experiences, and a number of the characters are kind of amalgamations of different people that I knew, but it's definitely a novel. But I did draw on a lot of experience. I lived there from 1992 until 2000. And it was a really exciting, fun time to live there. It was also a fraught time to live there. When I got there in 92, it was really still the height of the AIDS epidemic. And that made it very, it's very difficult. And it was also before the internet. It was actually the .com bubble was just starting to inflate. And over the time that I was there, the .com bubble just got larger and larger. So it was the novel is bracketed by these two historical events: the height of the AIDS epidemic and the beginning of the .com era and the rise of the internet and cell phones and everything. So both aspects were changing the world really drastically at the same time.
I loved as an art historian, congratulations. There's so many vivid descriptions of the architecture of San Francisco. And yes, admittedly, I've only seen it on like TV and film and whatnot and like postcards, but it was very, very evocative. Like I just see it in my mind's eye as we were, journeying through the novel. Speaking of journeys, so Walter is our main character, and he doesn't, as he says in the first chapter, he didn't go to San Francisco following his ex-boyfriend Elliot. But what draws him to San Francisco?
Well, I mean, that was something that was kind of taken from my own life. He really goes to San Francisco looking for community and love. And when I went to San Francisco, it was really to be someplace where I could just be out and not worry about it at all, not even think about it, right? Just have it even in the background of my life. And I went to McAllister. I moved to San Francisco pretty soon after I graduated from McAllister. And McAllister, I will say, was absolutely the best place to be a queer undergrad and to come out. It was the best possible situation for coming out. And even so, St. Paul at the time in 1992, it was so sleepy. I love St. Paul. No shade. But it was so sleepy, and it was kind of, it still had that small town kind of large town feel rather than the city feel. So I really wanted to be someplace that felt like a bigger city and felt a bit more glamorous, and where you could just be queer and not think about it at all. And so that's what Walter's looking for too.
Speaking of relationships, so Carrie and Sasha are the drivers, really, of Walter's development as a queer person living and loving in San Francisco. I was about to combine Sacramento and San Francisco. In San Francisco. Can you share very different? Can you share how Walter meets them and the role they begin to play in his life?
Well, he sees them first, and that's really important, I think, because The first, I'd say third of the novel, or not even that much, first 50 pages, he's really searching for his people. He's kind of, and I wanted to have that sense of, you get to a new city and you're really lost, even if you know one or two people. You're really searching, and that can take a really long time. So I took some time with that in the novel, and he sees this really glamorous couple. I mean, he thinks that they're the most glamorous people he's ever seen. Carrie and Sasha. He sees them a couple places, but there's a moment where he sees them at the Castro Theater in the Castro, and is just kind of smitten and thinks, I've got to meet those two because they're so glamorous. So he sees them first before he meets them. And the importance of that is Walter is really visual, and that's part of how he's, or why he's obsessed with films. He's very film obsessed because he's so visual, and he sees Carrie and Sasha, who dress like Hollywood starlets. He sees them as being very cinematic, very, very filmic. And then eventually, through a couple of novelistic machinations, they wind up actually having conversations.
Well, we are talking with Christopher Tradowsky, author of Midnight at the Cinema Palace, which comes out on June 10th. I've got like a minute here before the break, and I want to talk more about this, though, because I love how you describe Carrie and Sasha as ambassadors of ambivalence. And you write that, just to quote your book at you, both would say they were more or less bisexual, but that designation only got you so far if you were deeply skeptical, as they were, about what a man and a woman was in the first place. The two of them would talk about sexuality frequently as an existential given, while all the while admitting they had no idea what it was in the first place. And I had to read that quote, which is actually a truncated quote. I think it's from like page 89. Can you tell I love your book?
Thank you.
It was such an amazing exploration of ambivalence and what that could mean. We're going to take that break here. We're going to have more with Christopher Tradowsky when we come back. Connect with more progressive news and radio at am950radio.com and heartlandsignal.com. More to come on The Gailey Show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm your host, John Parker. It's about 21 minutes after the hour. We are here today with Christopher Tradowsky, whose debut novel, Midnight at the Cinema Palace, comes out on June 10th. Christopher is a writer, artist, and art historian, was awarded the J. Michael Samuel Prize from the Lambda Literary Foundation in 2023. Reviewing the book, Kirkus Reviews writes that Midnight at the Cinema Palace will leave you pining for a playlist of jazz standards, a double feature, a mission burrito, and a ticket to SFO, past or present. Christopher, to pick it up where we were before the break, we were talking about Carrie and Sasha, this important couple and soon to be important relationship for Walter, and they describe themselves as ambassadors of ambivalence. Tell us more.
Well, Carrie and Sasha, today we would call them probably non-binary or genderqueer, but we didn't have that language at the time. And so I wanted to kind of approximate the way that we would talk about gender at the time, because of course we were constantly having conversations about gender and gender fluidity and queerness. Judith Butler has been a really big influence for me, and her theories of queer performativity have been really important to me. And I allude to those in the book. So I just came up with that moment where I kind of summarized the way that they might talk about gender and sexuality as prizing ambivalence and ambiguity, and prizing the kind of in-betweenness of bisexuality and sexual fluidity and all that good stuff.
As a person who is in a three relationship or a throuple, I always find it interesting to talk to writers about how they develop poly relationships. And so can we talk a little bit, I don't want to give spoilers away, obviously, but can we talk about Walter and Carrie and Sasha's relationship? Because it is a slow burn.
I did have anxieties about the slow burn being so very slow. But I also am really happy with that aspect of it, because the friendship comes first. And I understood very well the dynamic of a very romantic friendship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of kind of like, will they, won't they? And I love that kind of slow burn tension to it. But it was really important that the friendships come first, and that the friendships be strong, and that that be kind of the basis of the three-way dynamic of Walter, Carrie, and Sasha.
Absolutely. Film also plays a huge role in Walter's life and also the development of that relationship, because Carrie and Walter do start writing a screenplay of their own. Talk to me about the film's role, because film also beginning writer here, so I want to be careful about how I say things here, but film could be a character, kind of like San Francisco is a character within the novel, but it does play a driving force within it, ultimately also in Walter's development as a human and what his goals are. Talk to us about writing film and including that in the novel.
Thank you for that question. The novel is very ekphrastic, and by that I mean it refers to other artworks and primarily film. It's like there are moments that are like tributes to some of Walter's favorite films, and not coincidentally some of my favorite films, right? And so there are just whole paragraphs and even pages where it's kind of rhapsodizing about film. And I actually had to be careful with that. I had to kind of pare that back. Part of me really wanted to write a novel of ideas about film, and it's pretty easy to get kind of egg-headed about it, and I didn't want that to kind of slow down the reader's experience too much. But there are lots of ideas about film in the book, and particularly about the way watching films structures or guides our sense of identity and desire, who we identify with in the film and who we desire in the film. And that's something that Walter thinks about a lot. Who do I want to be, and who do I desire, and how can those things sometimes get crisscrossed?
I loved when there'd be a reference to a film, but you wouldn't necessarily put the film's title in there. Like you had a reference to Barbara Stanwyck not knowing how to change a diaper, and like she has the child like hanging upside down. And I'm like, I think that's Christmas in Connecticut, which is one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time. We're talking with Christopher Tradowsky, author of Midnight at the Cinema Palace, which comes out on June 10th. A particular word that stuck out for me near the end of the novel is ephemerality. I was so if there was a word maybe to describe the novel, I'd be like, that's a really good one to choose from. Talk to me about the idea of ephemerality and how that shows up not only in the relationship that they develop, our three main characters, but also in that time period. That time period also can feel very ephemeral.
Oh yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, film is ephemeral in that the filmic or the cinematic experience, which I'm very concerned with in the book, above and beyond the experience of movies that you might watch on your TV, going to the cinema and having experience with other people in the cinema, the whole immersive aspect of the cinema. And that I love, but part of what I love about it is the ephemerality of it. The film runs out, the screen goes black, right? And then you're left with just these kind of memories of shadows. And another thing about film is that you are communing, you're communing with the dead in a way. This is something that the theorist Roland Barthes talks about, that film always captures people. You go to an old movie from the 40s, there's many of the actors are dead, right? And you're kind of communing with them in that way. And it both is, it's both a record of that time and place, but it's ephemeral at the same time. It's always kind of disappearing before you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christopher, for joining me today. There's so much that we could have talked to, but I think you're going to join me at Pride in the Twin Cities, so maybe we can continue the conversation. The novel is Midnight at the Cinema Palace. We've included links in the show notes and on our website for you to pre-order your own copy. Please, pre-orders are super important. You can find that link also on our Blue Sky account. We're at thegayleyshow.org. You can connect with Christopher at his website, ChristopherTradowsky.com. On Instagram, he is at Tradowsky. I've got to fit in a break here. None of this would be possible without our sponsors and advertisers. Shop with them, do business with them. Tell them you heard about them on The Gailey Show on AM 950 Radio or WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Coming to you from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota in the 2 p.m. hour, and airing weeknights at 8 p.m. on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm your host, John Parker. Joining me now in studio, executive producer Jim Pounds. Hey, Jim.
Hey, all.
And all right, so Mae West and the Trial of Sex, produced by Walking Shadow Theater Company, opens at the Crane Theater in the Twin Cities on May 31st. Playwright John Heimbuch and director Allison Vincent join us to talk about it. John is a founding member and artistic director of Walking Shadow Theater Company. Allison Vincent is an actor, deviser, and director in the Twin Cities, a company member of the Transatlantic Love Affair and Four Humors Theater. Both are also, most importantly, friends of The Gailey Show. And I'm so pleased to welcome you both back, especially to talk about this show, which is about a legal battle that Mae West was in that had huge implications for the queer community, which I did not know about until I started talking to both of you. So, John, as the playwright, do you want to get us started and telling us what the play is about and Mae West's role in this?
Yeah, sure. So some years ago, some of her works were entering the public domain. We found this through a program called Expand the Canon, which was about increasing awareness of female and queer and Black and BIPOC artists in history. And her play Sex and the Drag both came up in 1927. And so they just entered the public domain in the last 2 years. And I read them thinking, maybe we'll program one of these. And I found myself recognizing, first of all, that they have some problematic content from a today's standpoint. But they also, I discovered that she had this like 10-day jail sentence and this trial about obscenity. And the more I sort of dug into that and went down Wikipedia rabbit holes and such, I discovered that it was really all about her trial was the play Sex, where she played a sex worker. And after 11 months, they put her on trial after a raid, but they let the show run for 11 months. And part of the reason that they had this raid was to keep the drag, overtly queer play, from getting to Broadway. And they largely succeeded. And then at the same time, there was a law being passed as a result of all this in Albany, making it illegal to perform any acts of overt sexuality or what they called sex degeneracy at the time, which was vague, but it meant that functionally it kept queer representation from being on Broadway for the next 40 years.
So I'm sorry. This is in the early 1900s or Florida in 2023?
This is 1927.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Because you're describing all of that, and it
Right.
seems we're literally dealing with that right now. There was literally
Sure
a case in Florida where a judge like tossed a suit based off of the drag bands and
Mhm.
performance of that in Florida.
Well, and
This is
there's a lot of
crazy.
echoes of, don't say gay or don't ask, don't tell, or the drag bands, just a lot. Now the DEI initiatives being cut out. Like there's a lot of stuff that's just resonant right now.
And I hate to ask this question, but for folks who don't know who Mae West is, who is Mae West, John?
Sure. Mae West was a film star of the silver screen at the early silver era of Hollywood, 1930s. And she was known for her risque sexuality and witty comebacks and one-liners, and a sort of winking camp persona. She also was a blues singer. And her famous catchphrase was, "Why don't you come up and see me sometime?"
I've used it before. Just
Who hasn't? Allison, talk to me about, since we're acknowledging there's clearly overlap between that time period and what we're dealing with here today. Talk to me about directing this production and bringing it to life, because I imagine there's a lot of like people just going, "Yep, this and this seems just so familiar to us and our lived experiences now," even though you wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, so it's been really fun to discover things with the cast especially because in this trial, we live in a world where the truth is stranger than fiction, truly. And some of the things that happen in these trials, like especially the federal court case, are just like bananas. So, we'll be at the table reading pages, and then the cast will be like, "Well, this didn't really happen, right?" And John's like, "That is a direct quote from the transcript." So just like the sensationalism of the press and the way things are spun, and then having, uber rich folks in charge and controlling the presses, and then do just like kind of little passion projects about what they deem to be a problem in society. All of it is just rings true in a really, really disappointing way.
is it fair to assume? I can picture this happening two ways. Either you're ignoring all of the present that the production is just sort of authentically in the moment, or is there some sense of a wink and a whatever that we know what we're dealing with? How do you deal with that when you're that close to the truth?
Yeah. So we're staying. It's not realism at all. So I'm really leaning into her big influences, and I think a big thread for me is about how we always say steal like an artist, and Mae West did that big time from the Cotton Club and jazz joints and juke joints, and from Black artists at the time who also were struggling to get representation in these bigger spaces, and then stole from the queer community certainly. And then stole from, vaudeville. So bringing elements of that kind of vaudeville feeling, especially because there's just so much information to cover. And we have some moments of magical realism. The ins and outs of scenes are so fast. Like, vaudeville feels really right. So I think we're not really acknowledging the present day, but I think it's so clearly like a mirror of what's happening right now. That the framing device for me is not necessarily reality at all. It's just like, oh, this is all performance, all of it. The trial scenes, the political scenes, the actual backstage theater scenes, all of it is people just pretending to know what they are doing and then like winging it, basically.
Queer life, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of, there was an idea, John, that's really kind of rattling my brain as I was prepping for this interview and getting excited for this show, about the implications of this cutting queer folks off from their past.
Yeah.
Unpack that for us.
Yeah. Well, so I think as I've talked to or seen people posting on social media, I think a lot of times people who are younger or my generation, our experience of queer culture has been that it's been a solid upward arc, right? That things were bad in the 80s and they got better in the 90s with representation, and then in the thousands and 2010s. And so what happens, I think, is that a lot of people have this narrative that things are getting better. And so when anything bad happens, it feels like everything's crashing, right? And I think the thing that has been big for me after, especially reading George Chauncey's book, Gay New York, about New York City, especially Manhattan in the 1880s through the 1940s, is that it's always been there. And it's always, it's had moments of bright, shining representation before. And then it's come crashing down again. And I think from my mind, that's sort of a statement reclaiming and acknowledging that history and the fact that it's been shut down before is an act of fostering resiliency for people to recognize that, like, oh no, it's been bad before, it's been good before, and that we're on this pendulum swing, right, between those things. And we hope that it trends generally positive, but I'm not convinced that it always does. And I think that's an important thing for us to be aware of, that we can still survive regardless of what sort of situation we're in the present day.
Allison, I know you'll appreciate this reference. I get what you're saying there, John, about the pendulum. And sometimes, though, like Berlin in the 30s being the epicenter of, you know, the advancement of understanding queer life and queer spaces. And then the Nazis come in and they decimate it for a generation, you know, and it's when you're saying that this implicated, I mean, what the trial of Mae West, was it 40 years?
About, yeah, some from like 1927, immediately upon passing the law, until about 1965, Civil Rights Act and Boys in the Band.
So their ability to set us back generations is just so frustrating to read that. And also, I guess, what was it like for you as you're going through and you're writing this to see what the far right, I'm assuming well, back then it could have been,
well, it's interesting,
a joint effort.
It was sort of the thing. I mean, I think the thing that I'm really discovering within this is sort of the harm of populism as politics, because it was motivated really by the right, but the left is constantly saying things like, I don't believe in censorship in any form, is this quote comes up over and over and over again in all the papers. And then they go on to do the most censorious things that you would ever believe, because they're afraid of what might happen if they don't. So this notion of populism, I think, really strikes both ways in terms of that. And it sort of lets people feel safe, like they're the good guys, even when they're doing terrible things to small marginalized communities. So that's the thing that really resonated for me.
Yeah. We're here with John Heimbuch and Allison Vincent discussing Mae West and the Trial of Sex, which opens May 31st at the Crane Theater in the Twin Cities. John is the playwright. Allison is the director of the production. How, actually, again, for folks who don't know, Mae was part of the community, yeah?
It's not really. She was part of the community insofar as she was a very staunch ally, but she was not part of the community in the sense that she was herself a queer artist, even though we just have no evidence suggesting it. She was very into men.
It was what is Natasha Lyonne's quote? I'm queer in everything but the sex act.
I think that's it.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah. The thing is, she was sort of the first diva, really, you know? And so it makes sense to me that she would be the sort of person who would, you know, head a parade, but not necessarily the sort of person who would have considered herself queer.
I think in our vernacular, we might call her like a bio queen.
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I've noticed that she has a tendency in talking about things in her biographies and interviews of centering herself in whatever sort of movement she's part of, whether it's increasing the voice of queer artists or increasing the voice of Black artists. She still always sort of puts herself at the center of that act.
Allison, how do you capture that on stage without it seeming a caricature? Does that
Great
make sense?
question. Yeah, totally. So John has done such great research into the folks that were involved with her. Obviously, there's, this plethora of people involved in the trials and the legal aspects of what was going on in political New York at the time. But there are these wonderful queens from the village that she was working with. So one of them, Leo, what's his last name, John? Leo Howe, we've kind of centered as like her kind of main confidant and friend in the world of rehearsal. She was really close with her family as well, her sister and her mother. But Leo, I think, is I'm kind of using as this touch point to the queer community. And then I've been really conscious of staging her, like seeing him do something or taking something from his costume and then kind of absorbing that into her persona. So we've been doing a lot of that as a way to say, like, this didn't come from her. She took this from these folks who then had all of their representation yanked away, which is also why she becomes kind of a queer icon, is because it's a way of representing a drag queen without having a man in women's clothes, right? So it's like, it's a real roundabout mirror where we are able to see ourselves, even though it's not us.
This is giving Madonna Paris is Burning vibes.
Very much so. Yeah, Domino, our amazing drag consultant, literally used that example.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, as you're saying that, I'm like, where does this sound familiar from?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
nothing
much
is
of
new.
Ben-
Everything is old. Yeah.
Everything is old, right? Okay, I have got to take a break here. We're going to have more with John and Allison when we come back. Where you can get tickets for the show at Walking Shadow Theater. Where's my website? I just had my note right there. WalkingShadow.org. You can go on there right now, get more tickets and information. We're going to take that break. You can find more progressive news and analysis at am950radio.com and heartlandsignal.com. Stay with us. More to come. You are listening to The Gailey Show. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm your host, John Parker. It is about 9 minutes before the top of the hour. Mae West and the Trial of Sex, produced by Walking Shadow Theater Company, opens at Crane Theater in the Twin Cities on May 31st. Playwright John Heimbuch and director Allison Vincent are here with us. I'm also joined in studio by my executive producer, Jim Pounds, who you have some questions.
Well, the first I heard of this, I thought, who is going to have the responsibility of playing Mae West? And I know you talked a little bit about caricature or such a known figure. Who can you tell us? Is it multiple people? Is it one person? Who shouldered that responsibility?
That's a great question. So we have an amazing actor, Emily Grotzik, who's playing Mae West. So Emily is the only person who only plays one character. And another way we're pivoting away from that caricature piece is that this is Mae West kind of pre-Diamond Lil, which is her like final form, is what I keep calling it. So she's still kind of, she's definitely finding it, and it's just not to the level that we see in those early movies yet. So and then also I've been talking a lot with Emily about when that mask slips of that persona. So moments when she's alone, moments when she's with her most trusted confidants. So yeah, Emily's just terrific and has done such a beautiful job of finding the nuance between this is me performing and then this is me backstage figuring out how we're going to get all this to work, right? And then the rest of the ensemble is just like killer. They're doing so much work. They're playing so many characters, and then bringing such wonderful ideas to the stage.
And this is being performed at the Crane, which I don't know if everybody's familiar with it. Do you want, either one of you want to tell us a bit about what to expect in that venue?
Yeah. John, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. The Crane is a theater in Northeast Minneapolis. It's in the mid-industrial neighborhood, right up off of Stinson near 35W. And it's an 80-seat space run by Nimbus Theater, and it's fairly large. It's one of the larger stages of the small theaters in the Twin Cities. And we're really exploring some of the nature of the depth of that space and the width of that space, and also it's got some lovely equipment for projecting as well. And because of the height, it allows us some potential moments that are pretty fun. But yeah, it's very much one of the like larger ensemble spaces that one can find in town. And Allison has done a really great job of working with Sarah Barr, our set designer, to create space for all the actors. So there's our company of 7 is watching the show when they're not in a scene. They're on the side on stools, getting ready for the next scene, or participating from the corners. And so it's kind of this constant in and out that's happening. And because of this size of the space, we get to see that process as it unfolds, which is really cool.
I know sometimes you select a space based on the requirements of the play, Hamlin pool being an example, but
yes.
Sometimes do you ever just get the space that's available and have to shoehorn the play into
Well, I will
it?
say one of the advantages of being a playwright is that you can get the space and then figure out how to make the best use of that space.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, because you're early enough on, right? You can.
That was, you were talking about the Hamlin pool was Red Speedo, right?
Was.
Oh, that was such a good.
I mean, environmental stuff like that is just, I don't know, it adds another level, and it can't always be that way. But
for folks who are wondering, John wrote a play called Red Speedo, which is about a swimmer, and the whole play was set in the actual pool of Hamlin University. And so you got to sit in the bleachers, us as the audience, and watch this thing unfold. I mean, it brought realism to a whole new level. I really enjoyed that production.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we're talking with John Heimbuch, artistic director of Walking Shadow Theater Company and playwright of Mae West and the Trial of Sex, along with the production's director, Allison Vincent. Allison, you just did sort of an accent. And talk about the voice work, though. This is a very specific period that had very specific vocal work. How are you dealing with that with folks, with your actors?
Yeah, so I come from the world of clown and devising and physical theater. So I always really love, I always say, strong and wrong, come out swinging hard, swing for the fence, and then we'll craft from there. And that I feel like in clown, like there's no failure, because if you fail, like you're getting yourself into trouble which is an opportunity, right? So some of the voices that have come out of actors, I'm like, cool, not that, but let's copy and paste that somewhere else, because that's wild.
I never want to hear that again.
Yeah, no, everything's good. It's just maybe not good for that character. So it's kind of like, swiping on Tinder. Which voice is really the perfect match. We also have had the blessing of having Keely Walter in the rehearsal space with us. So she's incredible and has such a beautiful way of acting with voice actors, and helping them kind of think about the actual physicality of speaking and helping them place. And when I was emailing her, I said, so everyone's playing at least 5 characters at max, like 15. So I think a zone defense is really where we're at. So,
wow.
So she did one-on-one with Emily, and then 2 other folks who often either mimic Mae West or are like her sister Beverly is in the same neighborhood as Mae West. Everybody else, we kind of did, okay, here are like 3 different versions of a New York accent one might choose. And then we talked a lot about how to vary your voice, because, it's like we all have our kind of in the pocket voices.
Right.
So then it's like, once we've spent all those cards, what do we do? So like going nasal, going more forward, going in the chest. And then also making sure we're doing it in a healthy way so that actors can get through the whole run and still feel really strong and confident with their ability to land.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much, Allison and John. We're at the end of our time today. Thank you for joining us here on The Gaily Show.
For having us.
The play is Mae West and the Trial of Sex. Opens at the Crane Theater on May 31st. You can get your tickets at walkingshadow.org. We have a link to that in our show notes and on our website, am950radio.com. You can also find that link on our Blue Sky account at thegailyshow.org on Blue Sky. Thank you, everyone, for listening and or watching today. You can keep the gay going all weekend long. Tomorrow is Pride on AM 950. You can catch up with the best of The Gaily Show at 2 p.m. Twin Cities Pride Amplified starts at 3 p.m., followed by The Illegal Trans Woman at 4. And on the Downright Upright Show with Philip Anthony at 5 p.m., he talked with Michael Rathburn, creator, host of the Kindness Matters podcast, and Satoki Hemstreet, Executive Director of Rainbow Collective. The Matt McNeil Show is up next, and until Monday at 2 p.m. or 8 p.m., keep it queer, America.
Keep it queer.